this time bringing you my next 10 reviews. Every few months I like to release a video like this to just kind of let everybody know what I'm up to, what I'm working on, and with this particular one coming out in December, I figured I'd go ahead and include the new games coming out this month that I plan on covering, as I imagine a lot of people will be asking about them. So while I don't typically include new games in these lists, I decided to in this instance. And I wanted to add one little update at the beginning here. In my last version of this video, I mentioned I was going to be re-reviewing Cyberpunk 2077, as it's seen a ton of updates. However, after a lot of feedback from people on that video about that particular thing, what I decided to do instead is do a sort of 2-year update for the game's anniversary coming up here in about 2 weeks. And then when the DLC launches, which I believe is called Phantom Liberty off the top of my head, I'll take the time to properly re-review the title. Now, from there, to kick off this list properly, let's start with the new games coming out in December, as they are likely to be the ones that I finish first. And kicking off the month, we have 2 different games launching on the same day, December 2nd, this being the Callisto Protocol and Marvel's Midnight Suns. Now, these are very different genres, so I don't think they really care about sharing a release date, but as somebody who wants to cover them both, it does make my life a little bit of a headache. But the Callisto Protocol is marketing itself as a next-gen survival horror experience from the creators of Dead Space, which is a much-renowned horror game in and of itself. Personally, I'm just very curious in games that are attempting to market themselves as next generation. As with the relatively recent console generation switch, I think we're still a little ways out from seeing a lot of games truly realize the potential of that technology. So games that are marketing themselves in this way have my attention, even if this particular game isn't my normal cup of tea. And then we have Marvel's Midnight Suns. This is a turn-based strategy game using, of course, the Marvel Universe, and as a channel that covers a lot of turn-based strategy games, TRPGs, CRPGs, etc., this one is kind of right up the channel's alley, and a lot of people are curious for my opinion on this one, though I fully admit I'm a little skeptical going into it, as this particular iteration is going to be using card-based mechanics for the turn-based battles, which is hit or miss. Some people enjoy that, some people really don't. Personally, not really a fan of card mechanics. Though that said, the game is from Firaxis, the developers of XCOM, which are of course pretty big names in that genre, so it makes sense that Marvel would want to work with them in this way, but the previews and everything that I've seen leave a little bit to be desired in my opinion, but we'll see how this one pans out. Last on our new releases for December, we have High on Life. This seems to be just honestly a nonsense game made with the creators of Rick and Morty being involved. It seems to be a very silly game that's not trying to take itself very seriously, where aliens have invaded and they use humans to get high like humans are the drug. And overall, it just seems like a really fun and good time, which is the type of game I like to play every once in a while. But on to the other stuff. These are the older games I'll be checking out, and the stuff I like to play in between new releases, as after High on Life, the next game I'm interested as far as new releases go isn't until like the end of January, so we'll have some time to play a few older titles. Though it's worth mentioning these are in no particular order, I'll kind of play them in the order I feel like playing them in. But to kick this off, we have Alpha Protocol. This is an interesting sort of RPG spy game from Obsidian, and it seems to be a sort of cult classic, honestly. The people who've played it seem to really enjoy it, though admit that it has a lot of problems. Now, the real tricky part about Alpha Protocol is that it's not actually available for sale anywhere, due to some interesting problems with the rights to the game. So as you might imagine, getting your hands on it can be a little bit tricky, though, you know, it's the age of the internet, it's still very much so possible. And moreover, it's the last game from Obsidian I want to play before I make a video about the studio itself, which is what I usually do when I finish covering pretty much all of a various studio or developer's games. And outside a couple of minor things like some mobile titles, this is the last one from Obsidian I need to check out. And then next up, we have Kingdom Come Deliverance. This is one people ask me to check out a lot, so I finally decided to do so, though I am aware of it, and honestly, I kind of want to see it for myself a little bit as well. But Kingdom Come Deliverance is an interesting story about medieval Bohemia during the middle of a civil war. You play as just a random old peasant that gets thrown into it and kind of have to make your way and get by. Which, as far as these open world exploration games go, that's a really interesting premise. I've heard it's pretty good, I've been wanting to play it myself, and it looks like it's finally just about that time, and I'm looking forward to checking it out. Then we have Risen 1. This is actually the game I was planning on checking out next, but in my cursory research, I came across the fact that this particular particular game is actually getting an update this January that will bring updated Steam support, controller support, and everything. So I figured if I was going to check out Risen, it was probably best to wait just a little bit longer for that update patch that is coming quite soon. In addition to updating the Steam release, it's also bringing it to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, which feels like a better time to check out that title given that it's right around the corner, and I was planning on doing so anyway. But Risen is from Piranha Bytes. It is their second series of games. They started it after they finished up Gothic, and it's a lot more modern. I have actually played it a little bit from where I was planning to cover it, which is likely the footage I will use here. And just coming off the back of Gothic 1, it's a much more modern experience. I didn't really have much trouble getting this one to run. There are a couple minor problems with the Steam release that are easily resolved, and then you can just jump into it after that. And it's my understanding this game was originally intended to be a continuation of the universe of Gothic. However, that ultimately got canned, though you can still see a lot of it present, so a lot of it feels like it might be directly connected to the Gothic series, even though that it is technically not. However, it still has a lot of that hallmark Piranha Bytes game design to it. You start very weak, you slowly gain in power, all while navigating a foreign land usually, while you try to join a various faction. And I'm looking forward to checking it out. What I played with it seems like a much more modern iteration, and in some ways it even felt a little better than their more current stuff, Elix, as Risen 2 has a much more action feel to the combat, which is certainly pretty interesting. And then of course we have Gothic 2. I just finished up Gothic, and I'm going to be checking out the rest of the series, so unsurprisingly that includes Gothic 2. Gothic 2 seems to be the fan favorite in terms of the Gothic series. This and Night of the Raven, the expansion to it, seem to be much loved, though it's my understanding that the Night of the Raven did like a complete overhaul to the base game as well in terms of the balance for the game. So that'll be interesting to deal with. A lot of people recommend trying to play the vanilla version first if possible before checking out Night of the Raven, and I'll have to look into seeing how easily that can be done. And then in addition to this, there's even a sort of overhaul mod that people also highly recommend called the Chronicles of Myrtana, something like that. And that mod is so popular that I actually knew about it well before I even thought about reviewing the Gothic series, but something to keep in mind. How I deal with all those things we'll get to, but given how much everybody loves this game, I'm pretty excited to cover it for myself. And then after that, we have The Witcher 1. With the recently announced remake of the original Witcher coming, I figure it's a good time to finally dive into the Witcher series. Believe it or not, I've played and completed most of these games in my usual fashion already. I just never bothered to review any of them, largely because they're hardly games that are starving for content. But ultimately, my goal with all these reviews is to sort of widen out my catalog, so to speak. That way, if somebody's looking for any random game, they have a chance of coming across the channel. And bigger series like the Witcher series, Morrowind, Oblivion, all games I plan on getting to eventually, though the remake of The Witcher 1 provides a convenient excuse to finally dive into that series in terms of reviews, despite having played them all very thoroughly, actually. And then after that, we have Divine Divinity. This is a CRPG channel, of course, and Divine Divinity is one of those early CRPGs that kind of did a lot of different stuff. In many ways, it plays more like a Diablo-style game. However, this is a game I have beaten pretty thoroughly, actually, but just never got around to reviewing. And given how much I love the Divinity series, that tends to surprise people, so I thought it would be fun to jump back into it and actually do a review for it. As Divine Divinity, Original Sin 1, and Ego Draconis are the three Divinity games I'm actually interested in reviewing that I have not. There are two others, Dragon Commander and Beyond Divinity, though I don't think those are really worth the time to review, to be honest, because Beyond Divinity is absolutely terrible. So there's my review for you. It's a bad game, and the fact that it's the sequel to Divine Divinity is outrageous. Because as much as I love the Divinity universe, Beyond Divinity is one of the worst games I've ever played. Dragon Commander, on the other hand, is trying to do way too much stuff. It's a sort of game of Risk meets RTS. It's very strange, and I don't think anybody really wants my opinion on that one too much. And last but not least, we have Warhammer 40k Mechanicus. With the impending alpha and eventual release of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, I've been trying to immerse myself in Warhammer 40k a little more, and obviously play some of the better video games. However, that is a franchise that is known for some pretty poor quality games, but even still, there are a few that people really enjoy, Mechanicus being one of them, and the fact that it is supposed to be a TRPG, which is of course right up the channel's alley, makes this one definitely one of the ones that I want to check out. I'm especially interested in learning more about the Adeptus Mechanicus, or at least hopefully learning more about it, and if I'm not mistaken, the Necrons are involved in this game as well. But this game represents a franchise I want to learn more about, and the style of game I normally cover on the channel anyway, which makes it a perfect game to cover. Which I think is plenty of games to tide me over until the releases start again next year at the end of January, as the relative beginning of 2023 is a pretty exciting time with multiple big releases, but that's kind of a rough idea of what the next couple months on the channel look like, so I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, or if you're looking forward to any of those titles, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you